Good afternoon, welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlotte and this is Charlotteshelves. I upload weekly bookish related content and bookish lifestyle related content, and today I am bringing you a tag video. I was fortunate enough to be tagged by Paul, who is the accidental bookseller here on YouTube. I will pop his details below so that you can give him a follow, and he tagged a bunch of booktubers, created this tag in which you pick 8 books and you share 8 memories. The books that he chose were wonderful and his video was so insightful. It was a really great way to learn more about him as a booktuber, and some of the memories he shared were funny, some of them were quite sad and some were tender-hearted, but I felt like it was a very interesting and revealing video, and I thought the concept was also super interesting. So I was very grateful to him to be tagged in it, and I have gone through my shelves quickly this morning and found 8 books that mean 8 different things, 8 different memories, or 8 different types of emotion that they draw from me, and I wanted to share those with you today. The first book that I'm starting with is important to me because it was the first book that I remember purchasing that I was influenced by other booktubers to read. It was the first book and the first acknowledgement in my taste that was being influenced by online book review culture, and that was interesting and important to me because it was also the first few times where I thought, oh, I would love to make videos where I chat about the books that I love and the reading that I'm doing at the moment, because I love watching that content. This is a gothic, spooky kind of haunted house book. It is meant to be a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe story. Is it The Fall of the House of Usher? And when I was sold this, I heard it was quite scary. I found this very tame, and that's fine. Scary,
Made me jump.
Yeah, it made me jump. Severe alert. This is a test of emergency alerts. That was so loud. It's absolutely fine. I don't know if I would continue to recommend it to people, but I think the reason I've kept it on my shelf, it's not that I dislike it, it just kind of represents my first sort of foray into booktube and book culture online here. The second book that I would like to share is called The Hours by Michael Cunningham. My copy got damaged and I have yet to repurchase it. This book is exquisite. I think it won the Pulitzer the year it came out, maybe. I read this when I was about 18. I was on my gap year and I had made a lot of decisions. I was originally going to go away and study law at uni, and on my gap year I decided I was going to switch and change to do English literature, and that changed a big trajectory in my life, and I decided to do some resits to boost my English grades, and The Hours was a book I was given to study, and she gave me The Hours and The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath to read together and to write a paper for my A-level that discussed both those texts. And The Hours really changed my life and my perspective of contemporary literature, because I didn't read a lot of contemporary literature at the time. I read a lot of what I was told to read as a result of whatever I was studying when I was still in education. The Hours is not only an incredible book, but really changed and shaped who I am as a reader. So this story is split into 3 timelines, and it is told through 3 different women's perspectives. We firstly have a reimagining of Virginia Woolf, and she is writing Mrs. Dalloway at the time, at that period in history, and she is feeling very, what's the correct term, unwell mentally. Like, obviously you probably know Woolf had a lot of mental health issues, and at that time she was writing about wanting to unalive herself. And then the second strand is a housewife, I think in the 60s, and she is reading Mrs. Dalloway, and she is struggling with the suffocation of domesticity and the drama of a small town, and her life feels very small, and she too is not feeling very mentally well, and she is unhappy being a mother and the life that she is currently living. And then the third narrative is told in a much more contemporary voice, but it is written in the style of Virginia Woolf's writing. So the modern voice, which is told in the character of Clarissa, who is a character from Mrs. Dalloway, that is written using Virginia Woolf's particular writing technique called free indirect speech, and it is wonderful. It is very, very fluid. If you've ever read something that uses that particular technique, everything is all formed as one, all thoughts, sights, opinions, things that the author or the writer is going through, and it's all cohesively blended into one, and it can be quite messy and you can't quite tell where a conversation begins and an observation about a building or a book begins. And this book melds these 3 different storylines about these 3 different women together, all of whom are linked by Virginia Woolf, or rather the Virginia Woolf's work, and it's just incredible. And it's about the fate of their lives, and it's told only over a few days, I believe. I don't think it's like a long historic novel by any sense, but each of them have something impactful that happens in their life, and it is about how reading this book keeps them intertwined and connected. And it's about so much more than that, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but it is this rich polyphonic work that really, I don't mean this to sound sexist, but Michael Cunningham's writing of the female experience is beautiful. It is beautiful. I have never read a work by a man that so deeply shares about the female psyche, like how women think and write and feel. It's incredible, and it really changed my perspective on reading. The third book is a little more light-hearted, although it is not a light-hearted book. It is a book that I was given by a very close friend. I think we were about 16 at the time, and it is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. This is it a coming of age novel, would you say? Is it a Bildungsroman? I'm not so sure, but this book, my friend and I were obsessed with. We just loved it so much, and it was a book that I think a lot of teenagers at that time, sort of almost precocious teen lit YA. This is a lot darker and a heavier book. It does deal with themes of abuse, and it also captures teen angst quite well. I think if you were a teenager reading this, the isolation and the no one understands me kind of vibe of this character, separate from like the mental health issues I think that he has going on, I think a lot of teenagers can relate to that. And she gave this to me, and she wrote me the most beautiful note in it. I will share it with you. She put my nickname in it and then wrote, "For the most irrevocably passionate and intellectual wordsmith I have ever met, your words make every moment spent with you feel infinite love always," and then her name. And I remember feeling so touched, because my friend who gave that to me was in some ways amused for a lot of the writing and the poetry and the things that I was doing at that time. And when I went off to uni as well, she was a friend who I always wanted to share my writing with. I always really esteemed her opinion, because she was a phenomenal writer. Like, her writing and poetry is out of this world. It's just a gift. So for her to even compliment me in that way, not to sound like I was desperate for praise or validation, but to, I suppose this book speaks to our early friendship, but also the writing relationship that we had and the things that we would share, because we both did, I did a degree that had a minor in creative writing, and I think a good chunk of her degree had some creative writing aspects in it. And as we were growing up, sharing our creativity, but also having someone that I looked up to, who was also my friend, who I could share creative ideas with, this book was a real bond of our friendship, but also a testament to having a good person in your life who you can run and sound ideas off with, especially when it comes to your own art. The fourth book is It by Stephen King, and I had tried to read this a couple of times over the years, and I finally read it in its entirety last summer. And for me, this is the best Stephen King book that I have ever read. It's also the longest book that I've personally read. So this was a book I wanted to include because it is the longest book I've ever read, and I think that's, if you're a reader, that's a big milestone for anyone. But also, what was unique about it was that it unpicked a lot of the things that I love about the genre of horror, but also I had some revelations about Stephen King's works that I wanted to share with you. And the reason that I chose it was because a lot of Stephen King's books you will read and you might go, that was a 3, maybe a 3.5, and you move on. And he's got many that are standouts within his canon of works. But what I have come to appreciate about King's work, and what I wanted to share with you, was that his books have claws in them. And I'm sure I'm not the first person that has ever acknowledged this or discussed this at all on the interwebs, but there is something about the legacy of a Stephen King novel, like his characters, his tropes, the plot devices that he picks that stick in you. Like, they have claws, they linger. And so many of his books I have read, left for a year or two, given them a 3-star, and their characters and the little things that he puts in them are spiky and thorny and insidious. They are almost toxic. Like, there are so many things about his books that stay with you. And I don't have that experience with many other authors. Like, there are characters who live on in your head, in your nightmares, in your waking day. And that is, I feel, very unique to King. And I wanted to choose that book to acknowledge like the power of his writing and an aspect of his work that I think is perhaps underestimated, because a King book can live with you for a lifetime. They are The next book that I wanted to share with you is an anthology of poetry. I discovered this in my 20s, I would say. I've always been a Caroline Duffy fan. English students are like kind of forced to read her at school, and that either makes you hate her or love her. I didn't mind her at school, but definitely fell in love with her towards the tail end of uni and later in life. And this particular collection is poetry that is, I think, predominantly all about love, breakups, heartache, pain. It's beautifully written, and there aren't, sometimes in an anthology I will find a handful that I love, and I think that's amazing. With this, I feel like nearly every poem in this is exceptional. This won a lot of awards as well, from what I can remember, and I think why this also resonated with me at a time in my life was I read this when I was going through a particularly bad breakup. I don't mind sharing that with you. And this is like a literature student's equivalent of playing a lot of emo albums just to get rid of all your feelings and feel sorry for yourself. And a lot of what she had captured in here was resonating with me, particularly at that point in my life. And I look at this and I think how much of this work, or how many of these works in here, were just balms. They were tonics for my soul, as cheesy as that sounds, when I wasn't feeling good and my heart was feeling very broken. And a lot of this really helped with that, and it also helped me move through a lot of my malaise and self-pity. And this is just an incredible book. Whether you're going through heartache or not, I would recommend this. This is my favourite anthology of all. The next book that I want to share with you is a real goofy book, and it might not make sense to a lot of people, but I used to read a lot of blogs growing up, and it was stuff like XKCD, Explosum, Hyperbole and a Half, who else? Just lots of The Oatmeal, things like that. And one of the writers for Hyperbole and a Half released her own book, and that is by Ali Brosh. So this is a collection of essays and humorous anecdotes and things that just used to really make me crack up when I was younger, and they are bananas. Like, her sense of humour is so, I don't know if deranged is a polite or kind word to use in this context, but they're just incredible. And if you have ever read her work, we can be friends, because her sense of humour is very much my sense of humour. It's a little bit silly, it's irreverent, it's inane. And I picked this book because it reminds me of being younger. It also reminds me that sometimes I don't need to push myself to try and read books that I might not enjoy, or I worry about my brain not staying active or being stimulated enough by reading literary fiction or classics enough, and sometimes I just need to read something that is silly and light-hearted and is humorous. Like, a lot of what I read is actually quite distressing and somber. And this is to remind me that sometimes a nice light-hearted book can be just as pleasurable to read, obviously, and to not always read depressing books. So my second to last, my penultimate book is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and this is because it was one of the first classics that I read that I remember enjoying. I think at school you are force-fed a lot of classics, and it puts readers off for life. And I think many of the reasons that I enjoyed this was, one, it was by a female writer. I don't think you can underestimate the gender of a writer, especially when you're a child, but also that it was a romance. I had never read a romance novel that was a classic up until that point, and Austen became a really big part of my life. I didn't know when I read this for the first time I would go on to write my undergrad thesis on her. I didn't know I would go on to work in a research facility that was specifically for 18th century writing. I didn't know I would go on to become a rare books librarian, and the long 18th century would become my specialism. So in some ways I had no idea that the trajectory of reading this book would lead me to where I was. I think I mentioned in my couple of previous videos about what I ended up working as, and in some ways a lot of it comes back to this book. And it's so interesting how we look at things in hindsight and see where we've come through on a pathway. And I think it started with this book. So this book unknowingly shaped a lot of my career, a lot of who I became, and a lot of my reading as I have started. I appreciate it might seem dramatic to put all of that down to one book, but I think it's interesting how far I've come from following my pursuits and my interests in the way that I have. The final book that I have chosen is Hamlet by Shakespeare. This is possibly one of the greatest texts ever written, in my very humble opinion. It is very important to my life. It has been with me at so many junctures and events and things that I've gone through, and it's been very important to certain family members in my life, and most recently one of the soliloquies out of this was read at my late grandfather's funeral. So it is important to me, not only for his love and our bond that was over a lot of Shakespeare's works, especially the histories and the tragedies, but also how long this has travelled with me through my life as a book that I have loved. I first studied it when I was about 17, and it was the first Shakespeare that I really, really loved. Like, Macbeth unlocked a lot of things in Shakespeare for me, but Hamlet was the first one where I was like, I love this, like I love studying it. And I had a real rocky relationship with education at the college that I went to, but Hamlet just changed so many things for me, and it has been with me through various parts of my career, through various parts of my education. It has helped me get certain grades, it has helped me rereading it to give me strength and courage at times, or when I felt lost. Just, there are so many reasons that this book has helped me, and I don't want to bore you with all of them. Not all of them are particularly happy, as I mentioned, but this is a book that to me is a testament to the power of literature. Like, if you use books and poetry and plays in a prescriptive way, in a healing way, or a meditative way, the things that they can do for your soul is incredible. And that's how I feel about this particular play. And especially like when it was most recently read at my grandfather's funeral, the power of his writing in this is astounding. And I hope this is making sense, because I appreciate that probably sounds a little vague, but this is just one of the most meaningful books to me in the entirety of my collection, out of my entire reading history, and that's why this is number one. So if you are still here with me, thank you for watching this video. I hope you didn't mind me sharing sharing 8 books with you today that had different meanings or values or emotions or different memories. And if you have read any of them, do let me know your thoughts, but also go back and watch Paul's video, because his one is particularly good. And if there is a book that has given you a particular feeling or emotion and you feel able to, please do share that in the comments with me, because I'd love to know what is meaningful to you as a viewer, as a potential fellow friend. Before we say goodbye, please do like, comment and subscribe. It really does help my channel, and I will speak to you soon.